Well, I'm Bob O'Rear. I started with Microsoft, accepted my job at the end of 1977, and I was there through 1993. I came on board originally to be the sort of handle the mathematics in the early languages, which was the only thing that Microsoft had at the time, computer languages, BASIC, FORTRAN, COBOL. I was born in Wellington, Texas. It's in the panhandle of Texas, kind of flat land, very few trees. My father was a cotton farmer, and my mom passed away when I was very young, and then I was raised, for the most part, by my grandparents. My grandfather was a sharecropper and raised cotton. Of course, split the profits with the landowner. And then later on, we moved to Perryton, Texas. I had an uncle there that was a baker, and he convinced me to come to El Paso and go to a college called Texas Western. And I'd had friends a year or two older than me go off to college and say how difficult it was, and some of them were flunking out, this, that, and the other. So I was petrified going to college. So my declared major was PE. I played a little tennis and gymnastics in high school, and I thought, well, I'll major in PE. That won't be so hard, and so I won't fail out. I borrowed the money to go to college, and went off to Texas Western. And I got put in this dormitory, and it was just full of engineering students studying mining engineering for the most part. And when I said I was a PE major, of course, I was an object of a lot of harassing because I had such an easy major and they had it so difficult. And they kept whining about calculus, and I had no idea what calculus was. And so finally, I'd had enough of that, and so I just signed up for calculus, and it changed my life. I loved it, absolutely loved it, thought it was the most miraculous thing I'd ever seen. I loved the fact that it was irrefutable in mathematics as opposed to physics or other sciences. I really loved that, and I could go through the steps. I worked awfully hard. What didn't come easy, but it was a real joy for me to study mathematics. I hadn't had enough by the time I finished undergraduate school, so I went to graduate school at the University of Texas in Austin. And it was while I was at the University of Texas in Austin that I found out that they had this ability to attract companies to come and interview and get a job. I signed up to have these interviews and everything. And by the way, in graduate school, I took astrophysics. I thought that was a lot of fun, too, because it's primarily mathematics. And so I guess I was a natural fit for an aerospace company. So I interviewed this company, TRW, Thomson Ramo Woolrich, made me a really good offer. It was Air Force projects that we worked on. And it was using mainframe computers. Personal computers didn't exist. And in fact, through college, I used a mechanical calculator. It wasn't even electronic. It wasn't until I went off to work that there were electronic calculators. And mainframe computers where you program and you punch cards and you feed those cards into a computer and it does calculations. The original project that I worked on for several years was for spy satellites, long before we even admitted that we did spy satellites in the U.S. The whole project was covert, meaning that you couldn't discuss it with anyone outside the project. I worked first with the Air Force for several years, and then moved to Houston to work with NASA in the late 80s, leading up to the landing on the moon and everything. I worked on re-entry of the command module. After my NASA work, I worked for a short while in Huntsville, Alabama, with the Army in on systems that would protect protect the U.S. by shooting down intercontinental ballistic missiles. Thank goodness none of these things had to ever be used. And then went to work with the Navy. I lived on Andros Island in the Bahamas, worked with the Navy in perfecting submarine captains. After that, I moved to Houston and hooked up with a good friend of mine. And we started a little company there called Texometrics. And we married computers, electronics, and mechanical to build machines for a company called Polytop. And they plastic extrude the cap for for a hand lotion, where you flip up the spout and squeeze out hand lotion. And we built machines that would put the cap and spout together. It would do a laser scan of the top. We'd analyze that with software and then eject off bad product. And we went from that 20 or so a minute to like 100 a minute. The big problem was we were pretty good engineers, but we weren't very good financial managers or analysis. And so we were almost broke by the time we finished this project. And it got another couple of little projects and we were working on, and I wasn't doing any mathematics or programming for those projects. They were all mechanical. And so I was pretty bored, so I started looking around, and that's when I found the Microsoft opportunity. What made Microsoft an exciting idea for me was it was working on computer languages, which I'd always been fascinated with, but had never gotten to work with. Microcomputers were just getting going. When we solved the Polytop project, that was with an LSI-11, which was a DEC microcomputer. And it was it was fun having a microcomputer, a computer that you could touch and use and to program on and get immediate feedback. And I loved that. And I really wanted to work on languages. And Microsoft was the only opportunity I knew of that I could do that. This little computer rag called Software Age, they had a classified ad looking for programmers. And I can't remember exactly what it said, but the description seemed to fit me. And so I looked into it, made the connection. They flew me out to Albuquerque. And so I interviewed with Bill and Paul and a couple other people there were at Microsoft and liked what I heard. Of course, I was staggered by how young Bill was and how young he looked. But it didn't take long into the conversation to realize his technical depth and brilliance, and Paul's as well. I think I accepted my job at the end of 1977 and then started either right at the end of 77 or right at the beginning of 78. I had my own office and sort of the routine, the younger guys, I was the old man of the group. The younger guys, they like to come in around, 10 o'clock in the morning and work till maybe midnight or something like that. Or myself, I didn't like those hours very much. And so I would come in really early, like 3 or 4 in the morning and work until mid-afternoon, just so I would have a lot of peace and quiet all by myself and to solve problems. And so, and then we'd go have a lot of fun on weekends from time to time and took water ski trips. And, those days were pretty long because from day one, we were always behind on a project. Bill was our sales guy, and so he'd go out and he'd get contracts with various hardware vendors to put our languages on their hardware. And of course, he'd made promises that were very hard to keep. And it's always hard to project just how long a project will take, because you're working with new computers, and many times the issues weren't with the software, they'd be with the hardware, and you'd have to help the hardware guys fix whatever problems there were with the hardware, as well as the problems you had with your software. We moved the whole company to Bellevue in January 79, mainly because the industry was starting to change. It was growing up. A lot more microcomputers were being sold. The reason it was in Albuquerque to start with is that's where the first microcomputer was built. And you couldn't do anything over the wire in those days, and so they needed to be co-located with the hardware company to get languages up and running. The company that we were closest to in Albuquerque, MITS, got bought up by a company in the LA area called Pertec. And so we didn't have our main customer right there anymore. I think Bill's mom kind of convinced Bill to come back to the Seattle area. And so we moved in January 79 and continued bringing up languages for various hardware vendors and started the Xenix project, the operating system for multi-user operating system. And in 1980, IBM approached us and wanted to build a microcomputer and hired us as consultants to start with. And then because we had the languages, we were a little better known than just about any of the other companies that were working on microcomputers at the time. Bill's mom was really big in United Way. And the CEO, I can't recall his name right now, of IBM was also big in United Way. They had a chat, and Bill's mom told the CEO of IBM about her son. And that's how that contact originated. When we flew to Boca Raton to present our proposal to IBM, it was Bill and Steve and myself. We finished our proposal, pulled it off of the printer, ran to the airport, and jumped on the plane and flew overnight to into Miami. We arrived and we discovered that Bill didn't have a tie. And we thought, oh gosh, this is IBM. You got to have a tie to go in to see IBM. And our appointment, I think, was probably at 10 o'clock or 10:30 or something like that. And so on our drive from Miami up to Boca, the argument was, do we stop and get a tie for Bill, or do we go in with no tie? We know we need to be at the meeting, and we're going to be late if we get the tie. So we drive up to this shopping center. We go up to the door, and it's not quite open yet. And so we waited for the person to unlock the door of the shopping center. We run in, and we quickly select a tie for Bill, and we help him get it on, and then we go over to our meeting at IBM. Bill and Steve, of course, handled the contract negotiation parts. I was just the technical guy there explaining how we would pull together the operating system and the languages and put those on the microcomputer. I think the path had been greased by certain IBM guys So it was a fairly easy conversation, I guess you'd say. But I mean, there was probably, I don't know, 14 IBM guys talking to the three of us. We recommended that they use CPM, an operating system written by Digital Research. And so some of the IBM people flew out to meet with Digital Research, and it was a disastrous meeting for IBM and Digital Research because they got nowhere with Digital Research, and then came back and sort of insisted that we write the operating system. We scrambled around, found the foundation for an operating system from Seattle Computers, and a guy named Tim Patterson had written that foundation. Like I say, I started the project around Thanksgiving of 1980, and I'm guessing that Tim Patterson probably came on board about April or May of 1981. I became the project leader of bringing up a operating system on the new IBM PC. And so I had to pull together and write all the other aspects of the operating system. He had written a file system, which was a big part of the operating system, but not everything. There was a lot of other pieces that need to be put in place. And so I wrote those and interfaced with IBM as they were developing the original IBM PC, and started bringing it up. And then we were lucky enough to be able to hire Tim Patterson to come over and help me later in the project. It was a project, probably the most consuming project I ever worked on as a technical guy. If I was awake in those days, I was working on the project pretty much, or thinking about it. Having the operating system and the languages on the original IBM PC in my mind, was instrumental in propelling Microsoft to its place in computing. Hardware vendors then wanted to have similar programs or computers to IBM. And so to do that, they would need our software, our operating system, our languages to be able to compete against IBM. And so it made it much easier to sell any kind of Microsoft product, being the operating system on the personal PC. Probably the biggest challenge in getting this operating system running was fixing problems when you couldn't figure out whether they were software or hardware. And it was quite a challenge because the PC that I had to work with wasn't a finished product. I had 2 or 3 computers in there helping me, and they would generate a lot of heat. And so the wire wrap PC, the logic wouldn't always execute the same, even though you had the same instruction, because the wires would release and the logic would transition from one thing to another. And so I'd have to cool down the room. I'd have to wait for it to be cool enough to run again, and then execute the program and try to find the error. Mark Zibikowski came in and took over MS-DOS and made it into a real operating system. It was very fundamental when I finished, and he turned it into a much more robust operating system. I transitioned from all technical guy to a person to help establish a subsidiary and work with our customers overseas. First place I went was the UK. We located the first office in a little town called Berkhamsted in England. Mainly OEMs was what I would work with, the hardware manufacturers, to sell them MS-DOS or in our languages, or help them bring it up. Scott figured out that, one office in just outside London's not going to work well to service all of Europe. We need Germans in Germany. We needed the French in France, and so on and so forth. And so he enlisted me to help him start the subsidiaries throughout Europe. I was in England for just under 2 years and then came back. And of course, Microsoft had expanded greatly in the U.S. By the time I came back, because the PC was such an amazing success. And we'd hired a lot more people, and I had a lot more people to meet. And then I took on the job of starting subsidiaries and distribution with sort of the non-Europe, non-Japan areas. I helped start the subsidiary in Australia and Canada, several in Latin America, and South Africa. It's never routine because you're always looking for the right people, and you hate to compromise until you find that right person. And so I think that became my new expertise, was finding really good people for Microsoft. Paul and I worked together right from the very beginning because he is, of course, one of the original authors of the Microsoft Basic, and he was always around, whereas Bill was doing a lot of travel. Paul and I did things afterwards. I've been to his apartment many times and listened to him play the guitar. He was a wonderful guitar player. We went on camping trips around the Albuquerque area. I loved working with Paul. He was a wonderful guy. As crazy as it seems, when we weren't working really hard and we were going out having fun, a lot of our talk was all technical. People love the technical area, and they talk about things they did or things they discovered or this, that, and the other. I think I'm most proud, well, probably two things, but most proud maybe of the people that I was able to discover and hire that help expand Microsoft. And probably secondly, just bringing up the DOS on the original PC. I have such reverence for Bill and Paul of the skills they had to make Microsoft what it was. I mean, those two were two unbelievable human beings.